The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, which somehow made it worse. Nora didn't open it right away. She set it on the kitchen counter next to her coffee mug and her daughter's half-eaten granola bar, and she stared at the cream-colored envelope with the embossed gold lettering, while the morning light came through the blinds in thin, pale strips. She knew the handwriting. She had spent 11 years learning every loop and slant of it, signing birthday cards, grocery lists, Christmas tags. She would have recognized it from across a parking lot. She poured herself a second cup of coffee. Then she opened the envelope. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Whitmore requests the pleasure of your company at the marriage of Thomas Edward Whitmore to Kelsey Marie Dunning. She read it twice. Then she laughed, a short, surprised sound like something knocked loose from her chest. Not because it was funny, because what else was there to do? Thomas was getting married, and he had sent her an invitation. Nora had met Thomas when she was 26 and working as a paralegal at a mid-sized firm in Columbus. He was a junior partner at the time, 8 years older, with good hair and a loud laugh and the kind of easy confidence that she had mistaken back then for security. He told her she was the most intelligent woman he had ever met. He told her she was wasted in that job, that she had the mind of a real attorney, that she should go back to school. She believed him because he said it with such certainty, the way he said everything. They married when she was 28. By 29, she was pregnant with their daughter Lily, and her law school applications were sitting in a desk drawer, still sealed in their response envelopes. She had meant to open them. Then the morning sickness started, and then Lily arrived 6 weeks early and spent 11 days in the NICU. And by the time Nora looked up from that particular fog, a year had passed, and it didn't seem like the right moment anymore. Thomas was supportive in his way. He said, of course, they would revisit it later. He said she was already doing the most important job. He said it with the same certainty he said everything, and she believed him, and later kept getting pushed further down the calendar. She stayed home with Lily. They moved into a bigger house in Worthington, 5 bedrooms, a yard, good schools. Thomas was busy, which was fine because they needed his salary, and when he came home he was tired, which was also fine because she understood ambition. She told herself she understood it. She made dinner and helped Lily with her reading and went to bed at 10 and got up at 6 and did it again. For a while, it was enough, or close enough to enough that she couldn't tell the difference. The first time she found something on his phone, she convinced herself it was nothing. A text from someone named Kelsey, breezy, familiar in a way that made Nora's stomach drop. And Thomas's explanation was so smooth, so immediate, that she almost felt foolish for asking. An associate from another firm. They'd worked on a settlement together. He kissed her forehead and asked what was for dinner. She should have trusted the drop in her stomach. She had learned that since. The second time, she wasn't looking. She was trying to forward him a contractor's estimate. They were finishing the basement, and she saw the thread, all of it. She stood in the kitchen in her slippers and read through 6 months of messages while the pasta water boiled behind her and Lily's cartoons played in the next room, and something cold and permanent settled in the center of her chest. She didn't cry. She waited for Thomas to come home, put Lily to bed, poured 2 glasses of wine, and sat down at the kitchen table and told him what she'd seen. He didn't deny it. He said he was sorry. He said it had gotten out of hand. He said, and this was the part that stayed with her, the part she would turn over in her mind for months afterward, that she had changed, that she had become someone who just managed the house and drove carpool and didn't seem interested in anything bigger, that Kelsey made him feel like himself again. Nora said nothing for a long time. Then she asked him to leave. The divorce took 8 months. Thomas's attorney was thorough and so was hers, but there was no real fight. They both knew what was fair, or at least they both knew what a judge would say was fair. She kept the house through the settlement and then sold it 6 months later because she couldn't sleep in it anymore. She found a rental in Clintonville, 3 bedrooms, a small backyard with a dogwood tree that bloomed pink every April. Lily adjusted better than Nora expected. Kids are practical in ways adults forget to be. The first year was the year Nora does not talk about much. She had her daughter, her routines, a part-time job doing contract work for a small nonprofit. Enough to keep her busy, not enough to keep the silence out of the evenings. She called her mother more than she admitted. She went to therapy on Thursday mornings and sat in a soft chair and said, "I feel like I disappeared somewhere along the way." And her therapist, a quiet woman named Dr. Foss, said, "Then let's find out what you want now." It turned out what Nora wanted had never actually changed. It had just been waiting. She enrolled in the evening law program at Ohio State the following September. She was 34 years old and the second oldest person in her cohort, and on the first night of contracts class, she thought she might be sick from nerves in the parking garage. She wasn't. She sat in the third row and took notes in her particular, precise handwriting, and walked out 2 hours later feeling more like herself than she had in a decade. She was good at it. Not just competent, genuinely, organically good. The way things feel when you are doing what you were built for. Her professors noticed. Her classmates noticed. She graduated 2 years later in the top 8% of her class, passed the bar on her first attempt, and accepted a position at a boutique litigation firm that specialized in employment law. She was not a partner yet, but she would be. During her second year of law school, a mutual friend introduced her to a man named Griffin Cole at a backyard dinner party in Bexley. Griffin was 40 in the way genuinely self-assured people tend to be. He didn't announce himself. He just settled into a room as if he'd always belonged there. He ran an investment firm. Not flashy. Private equity, strategic acquisitions, the kind of work that doesn't make headlines but makes real money. He had laugh lines around his eyes and asked her about her classes with actual curiosity and refilled her wine glass without making a thing of it. They talked for 3 hours. When the party ended, he asked if he could take her to dinner that weekend. On their third date, she told him about Lily. He said he'd love to meet her sometime, and the way he said it was careful and unhurried and completely without performance. She appreciated that. She had learned by then to pay attention to how people say things, not just what they say. They had been together 14 months when the invitation arrived. Nora stood in her kitchen, holding the cream card stock, and thought about the kind of man who sends an invitation like this. She did not believe it was an accident. Thomas had options, a phone call, a mutual acquaintance, silence, and he had chosen the formal, embossed, gold-lettered version mailed to her house. The house where his daughter lived half the time. She thought about the message underneath the message. "Look at me. Look at what I have. Aren't you sorry now?" She put the invitation back in the envelope and went to pick Lily up from school. She didn't tell Griffin about it until that weekend, when Lily was at Thomas's. They were making dinner together. She was chopping tomatoes. He was doing something with garlic that made the whole apartment smell extraordinary. And she pulled the envelope out of her bag and slid it across the counter to him. He read it. His expression didn't change much, but his jaw shifted in a way she had come to recognize. "He sent this to your house," Griffin said. "He to the house where your daughter lives. Also correct." Griffin set the card down. He looked at her. "What do you want to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? She had been rolling it around since Tuesday. The sensible thing was to ignore it entirely, to treat it as the petty theater it was, and go about her life. Her therapist would probably agree. Her mother would definitely agree. But she had also spent the better part of the last 3 years rebuilding something that Thomas had convinced her she couldn't have. Her career, her confidence, her sense of her own worth. And there was a part of her, the part that still remembered standing in the kitchen in her slippers reading those text messages, that was tired of being graceful about it. "I think," she said slowly, "that I want to go." Griffin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay, you understand what I mean. I understand exactly what you mean," he said, "and I'm telling you, okay." She looked at him across the kitchen counter. This man who had never once made her feel small. "You'd come with me to my ex-husband's wedding." "I'd go anywhere with you," Griffin said simply, "but yes, especially to that." She had 3 weeks to prepare, and she used them wisely. Her firm had just closed a significant settlement, an employment discrimination case that had taken 18 months to litigate, and the outcome had been covered in the Columbus Business Journal. Not front page, but a solid feature with her name, her photo. A quote from the managing partner about her work. She had already been getting more calls than usual. She didn't go looking for the opportunity. It found her, The way things sometimes do when you stop moving out of fear and start moving towards something. A former law school classmate reached out. She was now at a corporate legal department in Chicago and asked if Nora would be interested in consulting on an ongoing basis for a portfolio of companies they managed. Consulting that paid extremely well and gave her the kind of work visibility that changes trajectories. She said yes. She called her mother in Cincinnati and told her, and her mother cried happy tears and said, I always knew. And Nora sat in her car in the parking garage and let herself feel it. The fullness of it, the size of it, for about 4 minutes. Then she drove home and made Lily's lunch for the next day. She bought a dress the second week. Her friend Marguerite, a woman with no patience for anything mediocre, came with her to 3 boutiques before they found it. Dove gray silk, architectural, with a structured neckline that was elegant without trying. It didn't announce itself. It just fit her perfectly and moved the way expensive things move, and made her look exactly like what she was, a woman who had arrived somewhere. Thomas is going to lose his mind, Marguerite said. That's not the point, Nora said. Marguerite raised an eyebrow. Isn't it a little bit the point? Nora looked at herself in the mirror for a moment. Maybe a little bit, she admitted. She got her hair done the morning of the wedding. A simple, clean blowout, the kind that photographs well. She had worn her hair in a ponytail for most of the last 3 years out of efficiency, and she had forgotten, somewhere along the way, what it felt like to take up space. She remembered now. The wedding was at a country club in Dublin, the kind with valet parking and a staff that moved like water. Nora arrived in Griffin's car, a dark SUV that people tended not to look twice at until they got close enough to notice the details. And the valet opened her door and she stepped out into the June afternoon in her dove gray dress and her heels, and she thought, all right, here we go. Griffin came around from his side and offered his hand. She took it. They walked in together. She noticed the moment before anyone said anything. The pause that moved through the reception area like a ripple. The way conversations didn't stop but slowed. The way eyes moved and then moved away and then came back. She was familiar with that kind of attention now. The kind you earn rather than demand. It was different from the attention that comes from spectacle, quieter, more durable. Thomas was standing near the bar with 2 of his law school friends, holding a drink and looking exactly the way Nora had expected, well-dressed, a little pink in the face, the smile of a man who had curated this day specifically to demonstrate that he had won something. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. Whatever he had been expecting, this was not it. She had imagined over the years what that moment might look like. In her darker imaginings, she was diminished. Still the woman from the kitchen in her slippers, still the one who had shrunk to fit a life that never quite fit. But she was not that woman. She had not been that woman for a while, and looking at Thomas's face, the way the smile recalibrated into something unsteady, something uncertain, she understood that he had not known that. He had sent that invitation to someone who no longer existed. She gave him a brief, pleasant nod, the kind you give to someone you used to know. Thomas's mother reached her first, Diane Whitmore, formidable and perpetually coiffed, who had never quite forgiven Nora for the divorce and had never quite admitted that. She looked at Nora, then at Griffin, then back at Nora, with an expression that moved through several phases in quick succession. Nora, she said. You came. I did, Nora said pleasantly. It was a lovely invitation. Diane's gaze moved to Griffin. There was a beat of social calculation. And you've brought Griffin Cole, Griffin said, extending his hand with the easy warmth of a man completely unbothered by anything in this room. Nice to meet you. The name landed with Diane the way Nora suspected it landed with most people in that particular social world, with a small involuntary adjustment, a recalibration. Griffin Cole was not a household name in the way celebrities are household names. He was something quieter and more consequential, the kind of man other men mention when they think no one important is listening. Diane shook his hand with a smile that had shifted into something considerably more gracious. They moved through the reception. People spoke to them. Some she knew from her marriage, some she didn't. She smiled and asked questions, and laughed when things were actually funny, and said thank you when people complimented her dress, and felt, the entire time, an immense and private calm. She had not expected the calm. She had prepared herself for anger or grief or the low-grade discomfort of being somewhere she didn't belong. But this was Thomas's room, and she realized, standing in it, that she didn't need to claim it. She had her own rooms now. At some point, during cocktail hour, while Griffin was deep in a conversation with a man who turned out to be the father of the bride and clearly had strong opinions about commercial real estate, Thomas materialized at her elbow. "You actually came," he said. His voice was doing something that wanted to be casual and wasn't quite making it. "You invited me," she said. "I didn't think you would." She tilted her head slightly. "Why did you send it then?" He didn't answer that. He never answered the questions that mattered. She had spent years not noticing that. "You look," he started. "I know," she said, not unkindly, just clean and clear and without room for the performance he was building toward. He tried again. Are things going well?" "Very," she said. "Congratulations on your day, Thomas." She said it the way you close a drawer. She walked back toward Griffin, who caught her eye over the shoulder of the real estate man and smiled at her. Just barely, just enough, and she felt herself breathe out for what felt like the first time all afternoon. They stayed for the ceremony and part of the reception dinner. Lily was with Thomas's mother that night, which Nora had arranged ahead of time because she was, above all things, a practical woman. She had danced once, with Griffin, to a song she didn't know, and he'd held her the way she had come to understand people hold things they are glad to have, carefully and without showing off. She did not feel triumphant exactly. That was the thing she had not expected. She had assumed she would walk out of there feeling like she had won something. And in a way she had, but it was smaller and cleaner than that word implied. It was more like resolution, like a number that had finally balanced. She thought about what Dr. Foss had said to her back in the bad year. "Let's find out what you want now." This was what she had wanted. Not Thomas's misery. She was past that, genuinely past it. But to stand in the same room with the version of herself she'd almost let disappear, and to discover that she had found her and that she was fine. More than fine. They drove home along the Scioto, the river black and wide in the dark, the city lights moving on the water. "You okay?" Griffin asked. "Yeah," she said. And then, because she was a woman who had learned the value of precision, "I'm really good, actually." He reached over and found her hand on the center console and held it, and didn't say anything else, because nothing else needed saying. On Monday, she called the Chicago firm and confirmed the consulting arrangement. On Tuesday, she had lunch with the managing partner of her firm, who said the words "accelerated partnership track" for the first time out loud in her presence, directed at her. On Wednesday, she picked Lily up from school, and they went to get frozen yogurt, and Lily talked about her science project and a boy in her class named Emmett who was allegedly very annoying, and probably liked her. Nora listened. She asked the right questions. She laughed in the right places. The dogwood in the backyard was done blooming for the year, but there were tomatoes coming up in the garden she and Lily had planted in May, small and green and stubbornly growing. Later, after Lily was in bed, she sat on the back porch with a glass of wine and her phone, and she did not look at social media, and she did not think about Thomas, and she did not replay the look on his face when he saw her walk in. That wasn't where she lived anymore. She thought about the woman who had opened that envelope on a Tuesday morning, standing in her kitchen with her coffee, going cold, and she thought about what that woman had been afraid of. Not much, it turned out. Not as much as she'd thought. The night was warm, and the backyard smelled like grass and something flowering from the neighbor's yard, and Nora sat in the dark and felt, quietly and without ceremony, like exactly herself. That was the whole story. That was all of it, really. A woman who had been told she was less, who had believed it for too long, who had stopped believing it and then built something that couldn't be taken back. Not for anyone's approval. Not even for the satisfaction of watching someone else had what they had lost. Just for herself. Just because she could.